Imagine a vast continent stretching from the icy expanses of the north to the scorching tropical forests of the south. A continent that developed over millennia in its own unique way, giving rise to astonishing civilizations whose achievements stagger the imagination. But what do we really know about these lands and their inhabitants before they encountered aliens from across the ocean? How did they live? What knowledge did they acquire? What cities did they build? Let's delve into this enigmatic era to lift the veil of secrecy surrounding pre-Columbian America. This world, so distant and yet so close, was inhabited by many peoples, each of whom left their own unique mark on history.
We will embark on a journey through the centuries to trace their paths, understand their culture, and appreciate their legacy. This is not just a story about the past. It is an opportunity to see how human genius, even in isolation, is capable of creating complex societies, developing science and art, constructing magnificent structures, and finding harmony with nature. Our story will begin at the very beginning, with the first steps of humans on this land. How did they arrive? When did they arrive? And what traces did they leave behind? We will explore ancient sites, study stone tools, and reflect on the lives of the first inhabitants who boldly explored new territories.
This period, known as the Paleo-Indian, was a time of hunters and gatherers, people whose lives depended on their knowledge of nature and their ability to survive in harsh conditions. We will then see how lifestyles gradually changed, from nomadic tribes to sedentary settlements, from foraging to agriculture. The advent of crops such as corn, beans, and squash was a true revolution, allowing people to build permanent dwellings, develop crafts, and create the first communities. This transition laid the foundation for the emergence of more complex societies, and ultimately, the birth of great civilizations. One of the most striking examples of this flourishing was Mesoamerica, the cradle of cultures such as the Olmecs. They are often called the mother of civilizations in this region, and for good reason. The Olmecs left behind colossal stone heads, complex religious beliefs, and perhaps the first rudiments of writing and a calendar. Their influence extended far beyond their lands, laying the foundation for future cultures. The next great achievement of Mesoamerica was the Maya. Their city-states, such as Tikal and Palenque, are astonishing in their architecture and engineering. The Maya developed a complex system of hieroglyphic writing and made significant contributions to astronomy and mathematics, creating a remarkably accurate calendar. We learn about their social structure, their beliefs, and the reasons for the decline of their great cities.
In the heart of Mexico, the mighty Aztec Empire flourished. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, built on an island in the middle of a lake, was one of the largest and most impressive cities of its time. We will explore the organization of their state, their complex religion with numerous gods and rituals, their military art, and the daily life of the common Aztec. Understanding their culture will help us grasp the scale of their conquest and their subsequent fate. Our journey continues south into the Andes, where unique civilizations arose.
The Nazca and Chavin cultures, which left behind enigmatic geoglyphs and majestic temples, will tell us of early achievements in art, architecture, and religious practices. These ancient peoples demonstrate a remarkable ability to adapt to challenging mountain conditions and create works that still inspire admiration today. The pinnacle of Andean civilization was the Inca Empire, known as Tawantinsuyu, or Land of the Four Corners. The Incas created a vast empire that stretched along the entire coast of South America. We learn about the impeccable organization of their state, their famous road network that connected the most remote corners of the empire, their ingenious system of terraced agriculture that allowed food to be grown in the mountains, and their strict social hierarchy. Their capital, Cusco, was the heart of this powerful empire. Let's move north to North America, where the diversity of landscapes gave rise to a multitude of distinct cultures. We'll begin with archaic cultures that lived long before the rise of great civilizations and trace their development in the territory of today's United States and Canada. We will pay special attention to the Mississippian and Puebloan cultures. The Mississippian culture, centered at Cahokia, is known for its grand earthen mounds that served as temples and tombs. Desert farmers such as the Hohokam, Mogollon, and Anasazi created remarkable cities and complex irrigation systems in arid regions. We will study their cities, their social organization, and the extensive trade networks that connected them with other regions. Hunter-fisher cultures developed on the vast Great Plains and in the Northwest. Their way of life was closely tied to the environment, especially the bison, which provided them with food, clothing, and shelter materials. We will learn about their unique culture and their adaptations to life in the open. Finally, we'll turn to the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Coast. A wealth of natural resources, particularly marine resources, allowed these peoples to develop complex societies with rich culture and art. We'll explore the diversity of their cultures, their profound understanding of the ocean, and their unique social structures. In conclusion, we will summarize our journey. We will summarize the remarkable achievements of the Native American peoples, their contributions to world history, their knowledge, their art, and their philosophy. This is a legacy that continues to live and inspire us today. And having grasped the full scale and complexity of this world, we will be prepared for the next dramatic stage, the arrival of Europeans, which will forever change the fate of this continent. Welcome to our journey through American history. Today, we'll travel back to ancient times to discover how this mysterious continent, full of unexplored lands and fascinating cultures, was settled by the first humans. This is a story of migration, survival, and the first steps that gave rise to the great diversity of peoples who inhabited the Americas long before the arrival of Europeans. Imagine a vast, little explored world stretching from the icy expanses of the north to the scorching tropics of the south. Millions of years ago, this continent was home to wild animals, majestic forests, and endless plains. But no human had ever set foot on it. How did the first humans arrive here? This question has long puzzled scientists,
And today we can confidently say that they came from Asia. The leading theory, supported by most archaeologists and geneticists, is that the settlement of the Americas began during the last ice age. Between approximately 20,000 and 15,000 BCE, when sea levels were significantly lower than today, a land bridge existed between Asia and North America. It was called Beringia and extended across what is now the Bering Strait. It was across this bridge that people, likely in small groups, traveled, pursuing herds of animals or seeking new hunting grounds.
These early settlers were hunter-gatherers. Their lives were entirely dependent on nature. They followed migratory animals such as mammoths, bison, and horses, which at that time inhabited the vast expanses of North America. They lived in small mobile groups, possibly consisting of just a few families. Their dwellings were likely simple, made of animal hides and branches, easily erected and transported. Archaeological finds provide valuable information about these ancient people. One of the most famous complexes of early stone industry is the Clovis culture. Around 13,500 BCE, during the period known as the Paleo-Indian, the people who created this culture produced distinctive stone spearheads. They were pointed, with characteristic grooves at the base, allowing them to be securely attached to the shaft. These spearheads, found in many places across North America, indicate that these early hunters were skilled craftsmen and skilled foragers. Life in those days was difficult. People constantly faced harsh environmental conditions, the need to find food and protect themselves from predators. But they were remarkably adaptive. They learned to use various plants, find water, and build shelters. Their tools, in addition to spearheads, included stone scrapers for processing hides, knives for butchering game, and various devices for processing plant materials. Gradually, following animals and exploring new territories, these first inhabitants of the Americas began to spread across the continent. They conquered the vast expanses of North America, moving south. Archaeological excavations show that as early as 12,000 BCE, people were living in regions as remote as Patagonia in southern South America. This demonstrates the incredible speed and efficiency of their migration. It's important to understand that this wasn't a single event, but rather a long process spanning many millennia. Different groups of people may have crossed Beringia at different times, bringing with them their unique skills and knowledge. These early cultures, while sharing common traits, gradually began to evolve in different directions, adapting to the diverse natural conditions of each region. As the Ice Age receded, the climate on the continent changed. Animal life also underwent changes, with some species going extinct and others adapting. Humans, in turn, continued to develop their technologies and survival strategies. This was the period when the foundations of future civilizations were being formed. The next, no less important stage in the history of the settlement of America is the beginning of agriculture. About 10,000 years ago, during the period archaeologists call the Holocene, people began experimenting with plants. They noticed that seeds that fell to the ground gave birth to new life.
This marked the beginning of the long and painstaking process of domesticating wild plants. Among the first and most important crops to be domesticated were corn, beans, and squash. These crops, known as the Three Sisters, became the staple food for many peoples of the Americas. Corn, with its high yield and nutritional value, was a true breakthrough. It allowed people to create food surpluses, which, in turn, facilitated the transition to a sedentary lifestyle. When people learned to cultivate plants, they no longer needed to constantly move in search of food. They began to build permanent settlements where they could live year-round. This marked a turning point in human history on the American continent. The advent of agriculture led to population growth, the development of crafts, the emergence of more complex social structures, and, ultimately, the formation of the first civilizations. Thus, the first steps on the American continent were taken by the ancestors of modern indigenous peoples who came from Asia. They were fearless hunter-gatherers who, having traveled thousands of kilometers, conquered new lands. Their story is one of resilience, adaptability, and how humanity, following nature, gradually began to transform the world around us, laying the foundation for future great cultures. Imagine a vast continent still untouched by Europeans, a world full of secrets and unexplored paths. It is into this mysterious world that we will journey today to uncover the stories of the first people to settle these lands. Our task is to delve into the past, understand how these first steps shaped the course of history, and pave the way for the great civilizations that will flourish on this continent. We begin our story from the earliest times, when the first people from Asia set foot on a new land. It was a journey full of dangers and discoveries, a journey that marked the beginning of the history of the American continents. Archaeological finds, like the pages of an ancient book, tell us about theories of settlement, about how these bold migrants crossed distances that seem almost unimaginable to us today. The chronology of the arrival of the first people is a mosaic formed by stone tools, the remains of ancient settlements, and traces left across vast expanses. And so we find ourselves in the Paleo-Indian period. This was a time of hunter-gatherers, people whose lives were inextricably linked to nature. They were skilled craftsmen, creating amazing stone tools. One of the most famous archaeological complexes of this period is the Clovis culture. Artifacts found at Clovis sites testify to a high degree of organization and craftsmanship. Sharp-pointed spearheads made of flint were perfect tools for hunting large game. The Paleo-Indians led a mobile lifestyle. They followed herds of animals, moving across the continent in search of food and resources. Their settlements were temporary, consisting of simple shelters that could be easily dismantled and transported. Their dispersal across the continent was gradual, covering vast territories from the icy expanses of the north to the warm lands of the south. These people were true explorers, exploring new landscapes and adapting to diverse environmental conditions. Then came a time of change, a time when humanity took a new, revolutionary step, the beginning of agriculture. This transition from hunting and gathering to plant cultivation became one of the most significant events in human history. People began experimenting with seeds, observing how new plants grew from them. This marked the beginning of the long and painstaking process of domesticating wild plants. Among the first and most important crops to be domesticated were corn, beans, and squash. These crops, known as the Three Sisters, became the staple food for many peoples of the Americas. Corn, with its high yield and nutritional value, was a true breakthrough. It allowed people to create food surpluses, which, in turn, facilitated the transition to a sedentary lifestyle. When people learned to cultivate plants, they no longer needed to constantly move in search of food. They began to build permanent settlements where they could live year-round. This marked a turning point in human history on the American continent. The advent of agriculture led to population growth, the development of crafts, the emergence of more complex social structures, and ultimately the formation of the first civilizations. Thus, the first steps on the American continent were taken by the ancestors of modern indigenous peoples who came from Asia. They were fearless hunter-gatherers who, having traveled thousands of kilometers, conquered new lands. Their story is one of resilience, adaptability, and how humanity, following nature, gradually began to transform the world around us, laying the foundation for future great cultures. Now we'll travel to the region that became the cradle of one of the most vibrant and enigmatic civilizations of pre-Columbian America, Mesoamerica. This is a land where culture was born and flourished, leaving behind majestic monuments and profound knowledge. The Olmecs were the first to lay the foundations of this great culture. They are often called the mother of Mesoamerican civilizations, and for good reason. Around 1500 BCE, on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, the Olmecs began to build their amazing cities and develop unique traditions. Their influence extended far beyond their own territory, shaping the cultural and religious beliefs of neighboring peoples. The Olmecs left us a legacy of astonishing art. Their stone sculptures, especially the gigantic heads carved from basalt, still capture the imagination. These massive statues, reaching several meters in height and weighing tens of tons, testify to their incredible strength and organization of labor. Olmec art often depicted mythological creatures, half human, half jaguar, indicating deep religious beliefs. One of the Olmecs' most important achievements was the development of a calendar system and, perhaps, even the simplest forms of writing. They developed a complex calendar that formed the basis for later Mesoamerican calendar systems. Olmec religious beliefs were closely linked to nature, with deities personifying fertility, rain, and the sun. They built magnificent ceremonial centers such as San Lorenzo and La Venta, which served as places of worship and social life. After the Olmecs, one of the most famous civilizations of the ancient world flourished on this same fertile land, the Maya. Their heyday spanned approximately 250 to 950 AD. The Maya created numerous independent city-states, each with its own ruler and unique history. These cities, such as Tikal, Palenque, and Copan, were centers of political, economic, and cultural life.
The Maya achieved incredible heights in the development of writing. Their hieroglyphic script, one of the most complex and developed in pre-Columbian America, allowed them to record history, myths, astronomical observations, and religious texts. They were outstanding astronomers, creating accurate calendars and predicting eclipses and planetary movements. Their mathematical knowledge was also impressive. They independently developed the concept of zero. Mayan architecture is striking in its monumentality and elegance. Pyramids, temples, and palaces adorned with intricate carvings and frescoes towered above the jungle, demonstrating the wealth and power of the city-states. The Mayan social structure was hierarchical, with a ruling elite, priests, warriors, artisans, and farmers. However, despite all its achievements, the Maya civilization experienced a period of decline. The causes of this decline are still a subject of debate among scholars, but likely included environmental problems, wars between city-states, and social unrest. While the Maya were developing in the south, another powerful empire was emerging in the heart of Mexico, the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs, or Mexica as they called themselves, arrived in the Valley of Mexico in the early 14th century and gradually gained dominance over other tribes. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, built on an island in Lake Texcoco, became one of the largest and most impressive cities of its time. The Aztec Empire was a well-organized state with a developed administrative system. Military skill played a key role in their society. The Aztecs were skilled warriors, whose expansion allowed them to create a vast empire. Aztec religion was complex and often brutal, with numerous deities and rituals, including human sacrifice, which were considered necessary to maintain order in the universe. The daily lives of the Aztecs were steeped in work and tradition. They were skilled farmers, using a unique system of floating gardens, chinampas, to grow food. Trade flourished, and the market in Tenochtitlan was one of the busiest in the world. However, despite its might, the Aztec Empire was doomed. In the early 16th century, with the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés, the empire was conquered, bringing a tragic end to one of the greatest civilizations of the Americas. Our journey now shifts south to the Andes, where equally impressive civilizations developed. Early Andean cultures, such as the Nazca and Chavin, laid the foundations for future great empires. The Nazca culture, which flourished from approximately the 1st century BCE to the 8th century CE on the southern coast of Peru, is best known for its enigmatic geoglyphs, giant images of animals, plants, and geometric shapes etched into the desert surface. These lines, visible only from great heights, continue to evoke awe and give rise to numerous theories about their purpose. And now that we've explored the amazing civilizations of Mesoamerica, our narrative smoothly transitions to one of the most fundamental changes in human history, the advent of agriculture. This transition from foraging to a sedentary lifestyle, which occurred independently in various parts of the Americas, became the cornerstone for the development of all subsequent civilizations. Imagine the world as it was thousands of years ago. People lived in small, mobile groups, constantly moving in search of food. Their lives depended on what the wild nature provided: berries, roots, nuts, and the animals they hunted. It was a way of life that required a deep knowledge of the environment, the ability to track prey, and quickly adapt to changing conditions. But gradually, somewhere around 10,000 years ago, and perhaps even earlier, people in various parts of the Americas began to notice something astonishing. They saw the seeds they ate fall to the ground, germinate, and produce new plants. This observation may have seemed insignificant at first, but it marked the beginning of a great transformation. People began experimenting with collecting seeds and intentionally planting them in favorable locations. One of the most important plants domesticated in the Americas was corn, or maize. Its wild ancestor, teosinte, looked quite different from the corn we know today. But thanks to millennia of selection and cultivation, humans were able to develop a plant that produced large ears with numerous kernels, making it a valuable food source. This development, according to scientists, occurred in the Balsas River Valley in what is now Mexico, approximately 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. Along with corn, beans, and pumpkins played an important role in the diet of early farmers. Beans, rich in protein, perfectly complemented the carbohydrates in corn, creating a more balanced diet. Pumpkins, in addition to their nutritional value, were valuable for their seeds, from which oil was extracted, and their peel, which could be used as a vessel. These three crops, corn, beans, and pumpkin, became the staple of the diet of many peoples in pre-Columbian America, and are often referred to as the Three Sisters for their complementary value. The transition to agriculture wasn't instantaneous. It was a long and gradual process that transformed every aspect of people's lives. When it became possible to grow enough food in one place, the need for constant travel disappeared. People began to settle down. The first permanent settlements emerged, which grew and developed over time. Life in settled settlements differed from that of nomads. People now had more time for activities other than the daily struggle for survival. They could engage in crafts, create more complex tools, and build more durable dwellings. This also led to an increase in population. Children were more protected, and mothers were able to devote more attention to them, which contributed to the growth of communities. The advent of agriculture also impacted social structure. Small hunter-gatherer groups typically lacked pronounced social inequality. But with the development of agriculture and the accumulation of food surpluses, differences in status and wealth began to emerge. Those who could produce more gained greater influence. This paved the way for the formation of more complex societies and, ultimately, civilizations. Imagine an early settlement. It might have been small groups of houses built from available materials, clay, stone, wood, depending on the terrain. People cultivated the land, tended crops, and harvested crops. Life was closely linked to natural cycles, the rainy and dry seasons, the times of sowing and harvesting. In addition to plant domestication, animal domestication also occurred during this period. In the Americas, unlike in the Old World, there were no large domesticated animals, such as cows, horses, or sheep.
However, people domesticated turkeys, which became an important source of meat and eggs.
Dogs were also domesticated, serving as companions and hunting aids. In the Andes, llamas and alpacas played an important role, being used for transport and wool production. This transition to agriculture, which began thousands of years ago, was a quiet revolution. It was not accompanied by the thunder of battles or the splendor of conquest, but its consequences were truly monumental. It laid the foundation for everything that followed: the construction of cities, the development of the arts and sciences, the creation of great empires. It was a slow but steady process that changed the face of America forever. And now that agriculture had become the basis of life, people were ready for new discoveries and new achievements that would lead them to the rise of great civilizations. It was this transition to sedentarism and agriculture, which began thousands of years ago, that opened the door to the formation of more complex societies. With a reliable food source, people could devote more time not only to survival, but also to development. This led to the emergence of specialized crafts, exchange, and ultimately the emergence of the first true civilizations. And so we are transported to the region known as the cradle of American civilizations, Mesoamerica. This territory encompasses modern-day Mexico and parts of Central America. It was here, around 2500 BCE, that one of the most enigmatic and influential cultures of the ancient world, the Olmecs, began to emerge. They are often called the mother of civilizations because many of the cultural and religious ideas originating with the Olmecs were later adopted and developed by other Mesoamerican peoples, such as the Maya and Aztecs. The Olmec civilization flourished along the Gulf Coast, in the valleys of the Papalapan and Tonala rivers. Their centers were cities such as San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes. These cities were not simply clusters of dwellings, but complex ceremonial and administrative centers. Imagine early Olmec settlements. Perhaps they were groups of adobe houses surrounded by fields of corn, beans, and squash. Life here, as elsewhere, was governed by the rhythms of nature, but signs of a more organized way of life were already appearing. What distinguished the Olmecs? First and foremost, their unique art. They are known for their monumental stone heads, reaching several meters in height and weighing tens of tons. Carved from basalt, these heads presumably depicted rulers or important ancestors. Their facial features, broad noses, full lips, and a distinctive skull shape create an image that is simultaneously majestic and enigmatic. These heads were transported over great distances, demonstrating the Olmecs' advanced transportation and organizational skills. In addition to giant heads, the Olmecs created exquisite objects from jade, a sacred stone. These included figurines of humans and animals, jewelry, and ritual knives. Jade was highly prized, and its processing required skill and patience. Olmec art was more than just decoration. It was deeply connected to their religious beliefs. Religion played a central role in the lives of the Olmecs. They revered numerous gods, many of whom were associated with nature: a rain god, a maize god, and a jaguar god.
The jaguar was a particularly important totem animal, symbolizing strength and power. Jaguar images are common in Olmec art, sometimes combined with human features, creating so-called jaguar men, creatures possessing both human and animal natures. This reflected their belief in the connection between the human and spirit worlds. A major Olmec achievement, which had a profound impact on subsequent civilizations, was the development of a calendar and, possibly, the beginnings of writing.
Although Olmec writing has not been fully deciphered, there is evidence that they used symbols to record dates and events. Their calendrical systems, based on observations of the movements of celestial bodies, were remarkably accurate. One of the earliest known examples of a Mesoamerican calendar associated with the Olmecs dates back to around the 8th century BCE. This suggests a profound understanding of astronomy and mathematics. Olmec daily life likely centered on agriculture and religious ceremonies. The majority of the population likely consisted of farmers living in small villages around large ceremonial centers. They grew corn, beans, squash, chili, and cacao.
Incidentally, cacao was a highly prized beverage, consumed for ritual purposes and possibly serving as a form of currency. The Olmec social structure, according to archaeological evidence, was hierarchical. At the top were likely the priest rulers, who wielded religious and political power. Below them were artisans, merchants, and farmers. Trade played an important role, allowing local products to be exchanged for valuable materials, such as jade, obsidian, and shells, which were imported from afar. The decline of the Olmec civilization, which began around the 4th century BCE, remains a subject of research. It may have been due to environmental changes, resource depletion, or internal conflict. However, their legacy was profound.
The Olmecs laid the foundations of Mesoamerican civilization, passing on to their descendants knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, art, and religion. It was these seeds sown by the Olmecs that grew into the magnificent cultures we will explore below. We continue our journey through the history of ancient America, and after learning about the legacy of the Olmecs, whose achievements laid the foundation for future great civilizations, we are transported to the heart of Mesoamerica to meet a people whose name has become synonymous with wisdom, art, and mysterious knowledge. This is the Maya. The Maya were not a unified empire in our modern sense. Their civilization was a fascinating community of independent city-states, each with its own ruler, administration, and unique characteristics, but united by a common culture, language, and beliefs. These cities, such as Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and Calakmul, were true gems of Mesoamerica, spread across the territories of modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. The heyday of this civilization occurred during the so-called Classic period, which lasted from approximately 250 to 900 CE. One of the most striking features of the Mayan civilization was their art of writing. They developed a complex system of hieroglyphs capable of conveying not only sounds but entire concepts.
These writings, carved on stone steles, ceramics, bone, and even parchment made from tree bark, still reveal the secrets of their lives, history, and cosmogony. Thanks to these records, we learn about rulers, their dynasties, military campaigns, marriages, and important astronomical events. The decipherment of these hieroglyphs was a true triumph of modern science, allowing us to hear the voices of people who lived over 1,000 years ago. Astronomy and mathematics occupied a special place in the life of the Maya. They were skilled observers of celestial bodies, creating incredibly accurate calendars. Their calendrical system was one of the most complex in the ancient world, combining several cycles: the sacred 20-day Tzolk'in calendar, the agricultural 360-day Hab calendar, and the long count, which allowed them to track vast periods of time. The Maya were well versed in the cycles of the sun, moon, Venus, and other planets. Their astronomical knowledge allowed them to predict eclipses and other celestial phenomena with astonishing accuracy. This profound understanding of celestial rhythms was closely linked to their religious beliefs and everyday life. Mayan architecture is striking in its grandeur and harmony. They built majestic pyramids, temples, palaces, observatories, and ball courts. These structures, erected without the use of the wheel, iron tools, or draft animals, testify to their remarkable engineering and organizational skills. Stones were meticulously cut and placed, and many buildings were decorated with intricate carvings and vibrant frescoes. Mayan cities were centers not only of religious and political life, but also of trade. They created an extensive network of roads linking various settlements and facilitating the exchange of goods. The Mayan social structure was hierarchical. At the top stood the ruler of the city-state, considered the intermediary between the human and divine worlds. Below them were the priests, aristocrats, military leaders, artisans, merchants, and, of course, farmers, who made up the bulk of the population. The lives of ordinary people likely centered around agriculture. They grew corn, beans, pumpkins, as well as cacao, chili, and cotton. Artisans created beautiful ceramics, gold and jade jewelry, and woven exquisite fabrics. Ball games were an important part of their culture, having both sporting and ritual significance. However, like any great civilization, the Maya experienced a period of decline. Around the 9th century CE, many major classic period cities were abandoned. The causes of this decline are still debated among scholars. Possible factors include climate change, droughts, depletion of natural resources, social unrest, epidemics, or a combination of these. However, it is important to understand that this was not a complete collapse, but rather a transformation. Maya culture did not disappear. Its traditions, knowledge, and languages lived on in other regions and among other peoples, paving the way for new historical periods. The legacy of the Maya, their wisdom and achievements, continue to inspire us today. In the very heart of Mexico, on islands in the vast Lake Texcoco, lay a city that captured the imagination of its contemporaries and descendants. This was Tenochtitlan, the capital of the mighty Aztec Empire. The history of this people, their rise and fall, offers a remarkable example of how human will and organization can transform the world around them. The Aztecs, or Mexica as they called themselves, arrived in the Valley of Mexico in the 13th century. According to their legends, they were summoned by the god Huitzilopochtli to find a new settlement where they saw an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a snake. They discovered this sign on a small island in a lake, and it was there, in 1325, that the city of Tenochtitlan was founded. Initially, it was a modest settlement, but through hard work and masterful engineering, the Aztecs transformed it into one of the greatest cities of its time. The Aztec state was highly complex and efficient. At the helm stood the supreme ruler, or Tlatoani, who wielded enormous power. But his decisions were often discussed with a council of elders and military leaders. Society was divided into classes. At the top was the nobility, comprising the ruler, his family, military leaders, and high priests. Below them were warriors, merchants, artisans, and farmers. A special place was occupied by the Pippleton, men who distinguished themselves on the battlefield or in service to the state, who could receive land grants and even join the nobility. There was also a class of slaves, but their situation was not as harsh as in other cultures, and they often had the opportunity to purchase their freedom. Religion played a central role in Aztec life. Their pantheon included numerous gods, each responsible for specific aspects of life and nature. Key deities were Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, and Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent associated with wisdom, wind, and fertility. The Aztecs believed the world was in a constant struggle between the forces of light and darkness, and to maintain balance and the movement of the sun, they needed to make sacrifices to the gods. These sacrifices, both plant and, in special cases, human, were an integral part of their religious rites. It is important to understand that human sacrifice, although a shocking aspect of their culture, was not a daily practice for the general population, but rather was carried out as part of important rituals and celebrations. Warfare was vital to the Aztec Empire. Constant warfare allowed them to expand their holdings, collect tribute from conquered peoples, and capture captives for sacrifice. Aztec warriors were well trained and equipped. They wore durable cotton wool armor, feathered helmets, and used a variety of weapons, such as obsidian macuhuitl swords, spears, and slings. There were also military orders, such as the Order of the Eagle and the Order of the Jaguar, whose members achieved high social status. Everyday life in Tenochtitlan was steeped in labor and ritual. The city was built on a system of canals used by boats transporting goods and people. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy. The Aztecs developed a unique farming system known as chinampas, floating gardens created on artificial islands. This allowed them to grow abundant harvests of corn, beans, squash, chili peppers, and other crops. Corn was the staple food, used to make tortillas and porridge. The city's markets offered a wide range of goods, from food and handicrafts to exotic feathers and precious stones. Artisans were renowned for their skill in working gold, silver, and jade, as well as creating beautiful ceramics. Education was also an important aspect of Aztec society. There were two main schools: Calmecac, where the children of nobles were enrolled and trained to become priests, scholars, and military leaders, and Tepocali, where children of the common people were taught crafts, history, and military training. The Aztec Empire reached its peak in the early 16th century. However, its power was undermined by internal conflicts and external threats. In 1519, the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived in Mexico.
Exploiting the tensions between the Aztecs and the peoples they conquered, as well as their superior weaponry and tactics, the Spanish, with the support of their Native American allies, were able to besiege and capture Tenochtitlan. The fall of the capital signaled the end of the Aztec Empire, but their culture, language, and traditions left a deep mark on the history of Mexico, living on among its people. We continue our journey through ancient America, exploring its fascinating civilizations. After meeting the majestic Aztecs, our attention shifts south to the fertile lands of South America, where unique cultures emerged in the Andes mountain range, leaving an indelible mark on history. Here, among majestic peaks and deep valleys, cultures such as the Nazca and Chavin flourished.
The Nazca culture, known worldwide for its enigmatic geoglyphs, flourished on the southern coast of modern-day Peru from approximately the 1st century BCE to the 8th century CE. These people were skilled farmers who mastered a complex irrigation system to irrigate arid lands. They built canals and aqueducts, burying them underground to minimize evaporation. These hydraulic structures still amaze with their engineering ingenuity. The Nazca's daily life was closely tied to the cycles of nature and their understanding of the cosmos. They cultivated corn, beans, squash, and potatoes, which became one of the most important staples in South America. However, it was the Nazca geoglyphs that brought this culture worldwide fame. On vast areas of the desert plain, removing the top layer of stone, the Nazca created gigantic images of animals, birds, insects, and geometric figures. Among the most famous are hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, lizards, and eagles. These lines, visible only from great heights, still evoke awe and many questions. Their purpose remains a subject of debate, whether they were astronomical calendars, ritual pathways, or messages to the gods. Archaeological finds, such as brightly patterned pottery and intricate textiles, attest to the high level of Nazca craftsmanship. Their pottery is often decorated with images of people, animals, and mythological creatures, providing insight into their religious beliefs and worldview. The Chavin culture developed in a completely different, yet no less impressive way. It is considered one of the most ancient civilizations of the Andes, exerting a profound influence on subsequent cultures in the region. The center of the Chavin culture, which existed from approximately 1500 BCE to the 3rd century BCE, was the magnificent ceremonial complex of Chavin de Huántar, located in the Peruvian Andes. This site was a spiritual and cultural center, attracting pilgrims from across the region. The architecture of Chavin de Huántar is striking in its monumentality and complexity. The main structure, known as the Old Temple, is a complex system of stone structures, tunnels, and galleries.
Stone steles and obelisks decorated with intricate carvings have been discovered within the complex. The most famous artifact is Las Llantas, a stone stele depicting an anthropomorphic creature with features of a jaguar and a snake, demonstrating the complexity of their mythology and symbolism. Chavin religious cults centered on the veneration of powerful deities, often associated with the forces of nature, such as the jaguar, snake, and eagle. These images permeate all aspects of their art. Images of the jaguar, symbolizing strength and power, are frequently found in carvings and ceramics. Chavin art is distinguished by its detail and symbolism, and it had a profound influence on subsequent Andean cultures, including the Moche, Nazca, and the Inca Empire. Echoes of their artistic styles and religious motifs can be seen in the works of their successors, demonstrating the continuity of cultural tradition in the Andes. The Chavin people lived in small villages, farming and raising livestock. They cultivated corn, potatoes, and quinoa. Their society was likely hierarchical, with a priestly elite playing a key role in governance and religious ceremonies. Artifacts discovered, such as gold jewelry and ceramics, indicate developed crafts and trade links. These early Andean cultures, the Nazca and Chavin, demonstrate the remarkable ability of humans to adapt to challenging natural conditions and create complex social and spiritual systems. Their achievements in engineering, art, and religious beliefs laid the foundation for the development of the great empires that would follow in this fertile and mysterious region. They demonstrate how deeply rooted traditions and beliefs were, shaping the unique landscape of South American civilization. The Inca Empire, known to its subjects as Tawantinsuyu, meaning 4 regions, emerges as one of the greatest creations of pre-Columbian America. It stretched along the majestic Andes from modern-day Ecuador to central Chile, encompassing territories with an incredible diversity of climates and landscapes. It was a state built on a solid foundation of organization, engineering, and profound spirituality, where the very concept of empire acquired unique characteristics. The heart and capital of this vast empire was the city of Cusco, located in the Sacred Valley. The Incas called it the navel of the earth, the center of the universe. Cusco was not just an administrative center, but also a spiritual hub, a convergence point for all 4 regions. Its stone walls, constructed of enormous, perfectly fitted blocks, still captivate the imagination. The Incas' mastery of stonemasonry reached unrivaled heights, as they could work granite and basalt with such precision that it was impossible to insert even a knife blade between the slabs. The Inca Empire was built on the principle of centralized governance, yet respectful of local traditions and customs. At its helm stood the Sapa Inca, the supreme ruler, considered the son of the sun god, Inti. His power was absolute, but he ruled through a complex bureaucratic system. The country was divided into 4 provinces, each with its own viceroy. Administration was exercised through a network of officials who oversaw tax collection, law enforcement, and the maintenance of order. One of the most impressive features of the Inca Empire was its road system,
A vast network of paved roads, known as kapaknyan, stretched for thousands of kilometers, connecting the most remote corners of Tawantinsuyu. These roads were not just communication routes, but also a symbol of the empire's unity. They allowed for the rapid movement of troops, the delivery of goods, and the maintenance of communications between the capital and the provinces. Inns were located along the roads where travelers could rest and obtain food. Chaskis, messengers who, like a relay race, carried messages across vast distances, played a special role in maintaining communication. Agriculture was the foundation of the empire's economy. The Incas were skilled farmers who adapted their methods to the harsh conditions of the high plateaus. To cultivate the mountain slopes, they created a complex system of terraces. These stone-built terraces not only increased the area of arable land, but also prevented soil erosion and efficiently used water. The main crops were corn, potatoes, quinoa, and beans. Potatoes, domesticated in the Andes long before the Incas, became a vital staple, ensuring the population's survival in any conditions. The Incas also developed advanced irrigation techniques, constructing canals and aqueducts to deliver water to the fields. The Inca social structure was strictly hierarchical. At the top was the Sapa Inca and his family. Below them were the nobility, who occupied important administrative and military positions. Then came the priests, artisans, and merchants. The bulk of the population consisted of peasants who lived in communities known as Ayu. Each Ayu owned their own land, which they cultivated collectively. The Incas did not use money as we know it. Instead, they relied on a system of barter and labor services. Each member of the community was required to work a certain amount of time on public works projects, whether building roads, temples, or cultivating lands belonging to the state or the priesthood. Religion played a central role in Inca life. They revered many gods, but the most important were Inti, the sun god, and Viracocha, the creator god. Inti was considered the ancestor of the Sapa Inca, giving him a sacred status. Temples dedicated to the gods were built throughout the empire, and priests served in them, conducting complex rituals and sacrifices. Although human sacrifices were not as widespread as in some other cultures, they occurred on special occasions, such as during important ceremonies or natural disasters. The Incas were also skilled metal workers, particularly gold and silver. These metals had more religious and symbolic value than economic value. Gold was considered the sweat of the sun, and silver the tears of the moon. They were used to craft exquisite jewelry, ritual objects, and images of the gods, which were kept in temples. The daily lives of most Incas were closely tied to agriculture and communal affairs. They lived in simple houses built of stone or clay, depending on the region. Their diet consisted primarily of corn, potatoes, vegetables, and occasionally llama or alpaca meat. Clothing was made from llama and alpaca wool. Life was measured, subordinated to the cycles of nature and communal responsibilities. The empire's governance, despite its effectiveness, had its weaknesses. Discontent in the conquered regions, internal strife,
and the weakening of central authority following the deaths of the great ruler Pachacutec and then his son Tupac Inca Yupanqui paved the way for future upheavals. It was during this period of internal instability, when the empire was weakened by the civil war between the brothers Atahualpa and Huáscar, that the first European ships appeared on the horizon. The Inca Empire, with its remarkable organization, impressive engineering, and profound spirituality, left an indelible mark on history. Its legacy lives on in the ruins of majestic cities, in terraced fields, in art, and in the memories of the Andean peoples.
It is a testament to how human genius, in harmony with nature, is capable of creating societies of astonishing complexity and beauty. After exploring the grandeur of the Inca Empire, whose terraced fields and stone cities still inspire awe, our narrative moves north to the vast and diverse lands of North America. This continent, as vast and diverse as its southern neighbors, was home to a multitude of indigenous peoples, each developing their own unique path, adapting to diverse natural conditions. Here, in expanses stretching from Arctic tundra to sunny deserts and dense forests, cultures developed whose achievements, while perhaps not always as monumental as those of southern civilizations, were no less significant for understanding human history. The history of the settlement of North America, like that of the entire continent, begins with long migrations. It is believed that the first people arrived here from Asia, crossing the Bering Land Bridge, which in the distant past connected the two continents. This occurred tens of thousands of years ago, during an era when glaciers covered much of the planet. These early settlers, the ancestors of all Native Americans, were skilled hunters and gatherers. They moved slowly, gradually conquering new territories, following herds of animals and seeking new food sources. The period known as the Paleo-Indian covers the time from the arrival of the first humans to approximately 10,000 BCE. It was a time when the world was very different. The climate was gradually changing. Glaciers were retreating, and the landscape was transformed. People of this period lived in small, mobile groups. Their lives were closely linked to nature, the cycles of the seasons, and animal migrations. Their main occupation was hunting large game, such as mammoths and bison, and gathering wild plants, berries, and roots. One of the most famous archaeological complexes of this period is the Clovis culture. This culture takes its name from the city of Clovis in New Mexico, where distinctive stone arrowheads and spearheads were first discovered. These arrowheads, with their characteristic grooves that allowed for better attachment to the shaft, testify to the skill and expertise of ancient hunters. The Clovis people were widely distributed across North America, demonstrating their high adaptability and ability to explore new lands. They also used other tools, scrapers for processing hides and knives for butchering game. Life was difficult, but these people found ways to survive and thrive in harsh conditions. Over time, as the climate changed and large megafauna became extinct, the lifestyle of ancient hunters began to change. A shift toward more diverse forms of food acquisition began. About 10,000 years ago, during the period archaeologists call the Archaic period, humans began actively exploiting new resources.
They began focusing more on fishing, gathering small animals, and developing more diverse plant foods.
This was a long and gradual process that laid the foundation for future cultural transformations. Around 5000 BCE, and even earlier in some regions, one of the most important stages in human history began: the emergence of agriculture. This process, commonly referred to as the Neolithic Revolution, also occurred in North America, although somewhat later than in the Middle East. People began cultivating wild plants, gradually selecting and breeding new varieties. Among the first domesticated crops, which became staples of the diet of many North American peoples, were corn, beans, and squash. These plants, known as the Three Sisters, formed the basis of the diet and facilitated a sedentary lifestyle. The advent of agriculture had a profound impact on human life. Now, with a reliable food source, people could settle in one place. This led to the emergence of permanent settlements, the development of new technologies such as ceramics, and a more complex social structure. Gradually, larger communities began to form, more durable dwellings were built, and trade links developed. Life became less dependent on constant movement, allowing knowledge to accumulate and be passed on from generation to generation. While great civilizations such as the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec flourished in Mesoamerica, North America developed along its own unique path. No single vast empire like the Inca or Aztec emerged here. Instead, North America was distinguished by a striking cultural diversity. Across vast territories, from the Great Plains to the deserts of the Southwest and the forests of the East, a multitude of tribes and peoples existed, each with their own unique traditions, languages, and social structures. In eastern North America, in what is now the United States and Canada, so-called archaic cultures developed. These cultures, which persisted for millennia, demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt to local conditions. On the Atlantic and Pacific coasts, people actively exploited marine resources, engaged in fishing and shellfish gathering. Inland, in forests, they hunted deer, birds, and small animals, and gathered wild grains and berries. Their tools were diverse: stone axes, spears, nets, and traps.
Life was measured, but it required constant ingenuity and a deep understanding of the environment. Mound-building cultures and arid agriculture occupy a special place in North American history. One of the most impressive is the Mississippian culture, which flourished between approximately 1900 and 1500 CE. The center of this culture was the city of Cahokia, located near present-day St. Louis. Cahokia was a massive city, estimated to have housed up to 20,000 people. A key characteristic of the Mississippians was the construction of monumental earthen mounds, many of which were pyramidal in shape. Temples and royal residences were located on the tops of these mounds.
The Mississippians were skilled farmers, cultivating corn, beans, and squash, and also engaged in trade, spreading their goods and influence across vast territories. Their social organization was complex, with a distinct hierarchy. At the same time, in the southwest of the modern-day United States, other unique cultures developed in the arid desert conditions. These include the Hohokam, Mogollon, and Anasazi. The Hohokam culture, which existed in what is now Arizona, is known for its complex irrigation systems, which allowed them to farm in the desert. They built canals that are still impressive in their scale. The Mogollon culture also developed in the Southwest. Their settlements were smaller, but they also practiced agriculture and produced beautiful pottery.
Perhaps the most famous is the Anasazi culture, meaning ancient in Navajo. They flourished in the regions of modern-day New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah. The Anasazi were known for their impressive cliff-face settlements, known as cliff dwellings. These multi-story stone dwellings, nestled in natural rock recesses, served as shelter and home. One of the most famous examples is Mesa Verde. The Anasazi were also skilled farmers, cultivating corn, beans, and squash, as well as hunting and gathering. They possessed advanced construction skills and produced exquisite pottery and textiles. Their social structure was complex, with ceremonial centers known as kivas.
Around the 14th century CE, for reasons that remain unclear, many Anasazi settlements were abandoned, a fact that remains the subject of scholarly research. Let's now move on to the Great Plains and the Northwest. These vast territories, with their endless prairies and dense forests, were home to peoples whose lives were closely linked to nature. On the Great Plains, where millions of bison roamed before the arrival of Europeans, many tribes lived a nomadic lifestyle, completely dependent on these mighty animals. Bison provided food, clothing, shelter, and tools. These peoples lived rhythmically, governed by the movements of their herds. They were skilled hunters, using spears and bows, and developed sophisticated methods of rounding up bison.
In the Northwest, where nature was more bountiful, indigenous peoples could afford a more sedentary lifestyle. Here, on the Pacific coast, where an abundance of fish, marine life, and forest resources supported a relatively stable existence, complex societies developed. These peoples were known for their art, particularly wood carving. They crafted majestic totem poles from cedar and decorated their dwellings and boats. Their social structure was often hierarchical, with developed systems of inheritance of status and wealth. The distribution of resources, especially on the coasts, was so abundant that some groups accumulated significant wealth and held complex ceremonies such as potlatches, ritual feasts where the host gave away or destroyed his possessions to enhance his social status.
It's important to note that all these cultures, despite their diversity, shared common traits. They all possessed a profound understanding of nature, developed complex spiritual beliefs, and maintained close ties with their ancestors and the land. Their lives were based on principles of harmony and respect for the natural world. They developed unique technologies, created works of art that still inspire admiration, and built societies adapted to a wide variety of conditions. In sum, North America, before the arrival of Europeans, was a mosaic of diverse cultures, each with its own unique contribution to human history. From mound builders to desert farmers, from plains hunters to wood carvers, these peoples created a rich and complex civilization that endured for millennia. Their achievements, their way of life, their spirituality, all are an integral part of our shared past.
Studying these cultures allows us to better understand not only America's history, but also the very nature of human genius, its ability to adapt, create, and find harmony with the world. This legacy lives on, reminding us of the complexity of the human experience and the importance of preserving cultural diversity. We continue our journey through pre-Columbian America, exploring the diversity of cultures that flourished on this continent long before the arrival of Europeans. In previous parts, we discussed the great civilizations of Mesoamerica and South America, the peoples who left behind grandiose cities and complex social structures.
Now, our journey leads north to North America, where we will discover another astonishing mosaic of cultures, each adapting to its environment in its own unique way and developing its own unique traditions. Today, we'll delve into the world of two vibrant and significant cultural complexes, the Mississippian and Puebloan cultures. This was a time when vast, yet equally impressive, societies emerged and flourished across the vast territories of today's United States and Canada. We'll explore those who built enormous earthworks and those who masterfully mastered life in the arid deserts. Let's begin with the Mississippian culture. This is one of the most significant pre-Columbian societies, emerging around 1705 CE and lasting until 1550. The center of this culture was the majestic Cahokia, located near modern-day St. Louis, Illinois. Cahokia was not just a city, but a true metropolis of its time, one of the largest settlements north of Mexico. At its peak, around 125 to 1200, Cahokia may have had a population of between 10 and 20,000 people, and possibly more. This was a huge number for North America at that time. A key feature of the Mississippian culture was the construction of monumental earthen mounds. These hand-built mounds served a variety of purposes. Some were funerary, others ceremonial platforms for temples and chieftains. The most famous mound at Cahokia, the so-called Monk's Mound, is one of the largest earthen structures in the Americas. Its base covers over 14 acres and reaches a height of over 30 meters. Imagine the thousands of people who labored to create such colossal structures, moving millions of cubic meters of earth. Life in Cahokia and other Mississippian settlements was closely tied to agriculture. The main crops were corn, beans, and squash, the so-called agricultural triad, which ensured a stable diet. Agriculture allowed for the accumulation of food surpluses, which in turn supported population growth and the development of complex social structures. Mississippian society was hierarchical. Chiefs and priests wielded considerable power at the top. Craftsmen, merchants, and farmers were below them. Trade played a vital role in the lives of the Mississippians. They maintained extensive trade networks that stretched for hundreds of miles. Rivers such as the Mississippi carried goods between settlements. They exchanged shells, copper, obsidian, and other valuable materials. This indicates a sophisticated exchange system and that these cultures were not isolated. Now let's turn our gaze to the southwest, where the Pueblo cultures flourished in the arid desert lands. These cultures, such as the Hohokam, Mogollon, and Anasazi, demonstrate a remarkable ability to adapt to harsh conditions and create sustainable settlements.
The Hohokam culture, which existed from approximately 350 to 1450 CE, was centered in what is now Arizona. The Hohokam were outstanding engineers, particularly in the field of irrigation. They constructed a vast network of canals, hundreds of miles long, to irrigate their fields and grow corn, beans, and squash in the desert. These hand-dug canals demonstrate a profound understanding of hydrology and an ability to organize large-scale public works. Their settlements often consisted of dugouts and adobe houses. The Mogollon culture, which existed from approximately 250 to 1400, was located in southern Arizona and New Mexico. The Mogollon people also practiced agriculture, but their architecture differed from that of the Hohokam. They built dwellings dug into the ground with wooden ceilings. Their pottery was renowned for its fine quality and beautiful designs, often depicting animals and geometric shapes. Perhaps the most famous of the Pueblo cultures, however, is the Anasazi culture, which means ancient in Navajo. The Anasazi existed from approximately the 1st century CE to 1350 CE, and left behind impressive evidence of their existence. Their settlements can be divided into several stages of development. In the early period, they lived in earthen houses, but later moved on to building more complex dwellings. A special place among the Anasazi heritage is occupied by the so-called pueblos, multi-story stone or adobe structures often located on cliff tops or in natural alcoves. These structures, constructed from carefully hewn stone and clay, are remarkable for their architecture and engineering. A prime example is Mesa Verde in Colorado, where entire cliff-face cities have been preserved. These dwellings provided protection from the elements and enemies. The daily life of the Anasazi, like that of other Pueblo peoples, was closely tied to the cycles of nature and agriculture. They cultivated corn, beans, and squash, and also hunted and gathered. Their society was organized around communities, where family ties and traditions played an important role. Spiritual life was also highly developed. They revered the forces of nature and had complex rituals related to agriculture and the life cycle. It's important to note that these cultures did not exist in isolation. Despite their geographical differences, they maintained trade and cultural links. For example, the Anasazi obtained copper and other materials from neighboring peoples, while their own ceramics and turquoise were in demand in other regions. By the end of 1350 AD, many of these settlements were abandoned. The reasons for this departure are still debated among scholars. It was likely the result of a combination of factors: prolonged droughts, resource depletion, social conflict, or a combination of all three. However, the legacy of these cultures lives on. Their settlements, their art, their agricultural methods, all are an important part of American history. The Mississippian and Puebloan cultures, each in their own way, demonstrate the remarkable human capacity to adapt to diverse conditions, create complex societies, and achieve remarkable feats in architecture, engineering, and the organization of life. They left us not just ruins, but also evidence of a profound understanding of the world, industriousness, and ingenuity. By studying them, we expand our understanding of the multifaceted nature of human history and the diverse expressions of human genius. As we move on to the next chapter of our journey through American history, we head to the vast and diverse lands of the Great Plains and Northwest.
These regions, so different from the lush forests of the East or the arid deserts of the Southwest, shaped unique cultures whose lives were intimately intertwined with the rhythms of nature and the amazing opportunities it offered. The Great Plains, stretching from the Rocky Mountains in the west to the Mississippi River in the east, were a vast expanse of grass. Here, for millennia before the arrival of Europeans, lived peoples whose lives were largely determined by the migrations of gigantic herds of bison. Bison, or American bison, were more than just a source of food. They provided everything necessary for survival: meat for food, hides for clothing and shelter, bones and horns for making tools and jewelry. The lifestyle of these hunter-gatherers was largely nomadic. They followed bison herds, moving across the plains in search of better grazing for the animals and, consequently, more abundant game for themselves. The dwellings of such groups were often mobile to facilitate travel. One of the most well-known types of dwellings was the teepee, large, cone-shaped tents made of bison hides stretched over a frame of long poles. These teepees were remarkably well adapted to the plains conditions. They provided protection from strong winds, summer heat, and winter cold, and were easy to assemble and disassemble. Life in such conditions required a deep understanding of nature, the ability to read animal tracks, predict the weather, and work effectively in a team. Bison hunting was dangerous but vital. Hunters used spears, bows and arrows, and specialized techniques to drive herds into traps or push them off cliffs. A successful hunt provided food for a long time, as well as materials for clothing, footwear, cookware, and many other essential items. Society on the Great Plains was typically organized into small, mobile bands linked by kinship ties. Leadership was often based on wisdom, experience, and the ability to ensure the well-being of the group. Spiritual life was closely tied to the reverence for nature and the bison. Many rituals and ceremonies were aimed at ensuring successful hunts, health, and harmony with the surrounding world. Shamans played an important role, serving as intermediaries between the human and spirit worlds. In the northwest of the continent, along the Pacific coast, stretched dense forests and rich marine resources. Unique cultures developed here, their lives closely connected to nature, but in completely different conditions. Peoples of the Northwest, such as the Haida, Tsumishi, Kwakiutl, and Nootka, lived in relatively stable settlements thanks to abundant food. The ocean was a bountiful source of fish, especially salmon, as well as marine mammals. Forests provided timber for construction, hunting, and crafts. These peoples were renowned for their art and complex social structure. They built large, sturdy houses of cedar wood, adorned with intricately carved totem poles. Totem poles were more than just decoration. They symbolized clan affiliation, told ancestral stories, and reflected social status and spiritual beliefs. Northwestern art was distinguished by vibrant colors, intricate patterns, and stylized images of animals such as the raven, eagle, whale, and bear. Society in the Northwest was hierarchical. Chiefs and nobles reigned supreme, followed by freemen and, in some cases, slaves. Ceremonies such as potlatches, massive feasts where chiefs displayed their wealth and generosity by giving away or destroying valuable items to enhance their prestige and status, played an important role. These ceremonies were more than just celebrations. They served as a mechanism for the redistribution of wealth and the strengthening of social bonds. Fishing, especially salmon fishing, was the basis of their economy and way of life. Salmon migrated along rivers at specific times of the year, and their harvesting required careful planning and organization. The fish were dried, smoked, and cured to preserve them for the winter. Besides fish, they harvested shellfish and crabs and hunted deer and other forest animals. It's important to understand that these cultures weren't static. They constantly adapted to changing conditions, developing their technologies and social structures. The Plains peoples, for example, eventually adopted horses brought by Europeans, which radically changed their way of life, making hunting more efficient and allowing them to travel greater distances.
In the Northwest, the development of trade and craftsmanship led to the creation of exquisite products that were valued far beyond their homelands. Thus, the Great Plains and the American Northwest offered two striking examples of how diverse natural conditions shaped unique and rich cultures. The Plains peoples, closely associated with the bison, developed a nomadic lifestyle based on hunting and a deep understanding of the environment. Meanwhile, the Northwest peoples, thanks to abundant marine and forest resources, developed sedentary societies with complex social structures, rich art, and developed ceremonial traditions. Their stories are remarkable adaptations, ingenuity, and harmonious coexistence with nature, testifying to the multifaceted nature of human experience before the arrival of Europeans. The peoples of the Pacific coast of North America represented a remarkable diversity of cultures, each deeply connected to the richness of the environment and the unique ways of life. This land, stretching from modern-day Alaska to California, provided its inhabitants with abundant resources, enabling them to develop complex societies and unique traditions. Here, where the mountains meet the ocean and dense forests descend to the coast, life was largely determined by the bounty of the sea. Salmon, like their counterparts on the Great Plains, played a central role. Their arrival in the rivers was an event requiring careful preparation and collective effort. The fish were caught, processed, and preserved, providing food for months to come. But salmon wasn't the only food source for these people. Shellfish, crabs, seabirds, and forest game, deer, elk, and bear formed the basis of their diet. It's important to note that life on the Pacific coast was less dependent on agriculture than in other regions of the Americas. The abundance of natural resources allowed many groups to lead a sedentary lifestyle without resorting to large-scale agricultural cultivation. This led to the formation of large, permanent settlements that could last for centuries. One of the most striking examples of such a society is the peoples who inhabited the coast of British Columbia, such as the Haida, Tsimshian, and Kwakiutl. Their villages, located near the water, were distinguished by impressive houses built of cedar, a durable and readily available material. These houses, often decorated with intricate carvings, were not just dwellings, but also centers of social life, places for ceremonies, and storage of valuable items. Art occupied a special place in the culture of these peoples. Wood carving reached unprecedented heights. Totem poles, which adorned the facades of houses and public spaces, told family histories, myths, and legends, serving as symbols of status and power. These monumental works of art, depicting totem animals, eagles, bears, whales, and ravens, were striking in their detail and expressiveness. Cedar was used not only for construction and carving, but also for making boats, dishes, clothing, and many other household items. The social structure of these societies was quite complex. It was often based on a system of clans and lineages, where status was determined by birth, wealth, and participation in ceremonies. Chiefs played a special role, wielding power and authority, but their power was largely based on their ability to distribute wealth and organize public events.
One of the most impressive manifestations of social organization was the potlatch, a grand feast and ceremony during which chiefs displayed their wealth by distributing gifts to guests. More than just a celebration, the potlatch was a complex social ritual that strengthened ties between clans, affirming status and rights to land or titles. Hundreds of guests could be present at these ceremonies, and the gifts distributed could include valuable woodwork, fabrics, jewelry, and even objects specially crafted for the occasion. To the south, in California, lived other peoples, such as the Miwoks, Pomos, and Chumash. Their way of life was also closely tied to the environment, but had its own distinctive features.
They actively exploited the sea's resources, gathering shellfish and fish, and also hunted and gathered plant foods in the forests and valleys. The Chumash, for example, were known for their skillfully crafted canoes, which allowed them to travel the ocean and forage for food far from shore. Their settlements were located along the coast, and they developed a complex trading system, exchanging goods with neighboring groups. The interior regions of the Pacific coast, such as Oregon and Washington, were also inhabited by diverse peoples. They exploited forest resources, hunted game, and fished rivers. Many also practiced foraging, gathering berries, nuts, and roots. Their social organization and art reflected local conditions and traditions.
It's important to emphasize that these cultures were not isolated. Developed trade networks existed between the various groups, enabling the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. For example, art objects produced on the coast could reach the interior, and rare materials mined inland could reach the ocean shores. Particular attention should be paid to how these people interacted with nature. Their lives were harmoniously integrated into the natural cycle. They understood the ebb and flow of the tides, the migration of animals and plants, and structured their lives according to these rhythms. Their knowledge of the environment was profound and passed down from generation to generation.
Although these cultures did not build grand stone cities like those in Mesoamerica or the Andes, their achievements in social organization, art, and environmental adaptation were no less significant. They created complex societies based on a deep understanding of the world around them and left behind a rich cultural legacy. Their art, whether wood carving, weaving, or jewelry, was not simply decorative, but also carried deep symbolic and spiritual meaning. It reflected their worldview, their connection to their ancestors, and the natural world. These peoples evolved over millennia, gradually developing their unique traditions and way of life. Their history is one of remarkable adaptation, ingenuity, and harmonious coexistence with nature. They learned to extract the maximum from what the land and sea offered them, creating societies that were both resilient and flexible. Their way of life, based on the exploitation of abundant natural resources, allowed them to develop complex social structures, art, and spiritual practices. They demonstrated a deep respect for the natural world, understanding that their well-being was inextricably linked to the health of the environment. Thus, the Pacific coast of North America was a region of incredible cultural diversity, each unique and distinctive. These peoples, living in close contact with the ocean, forests, and mountains, created societies that are striking in their complexity, richness of art, and profound understanding of nature. Their stories are an important part of the overall fabric of pre-Columbian America, testifying to the multifaceted nature of human experience and adaptability. The world we explored today was one of astonishing contrasts and profound achievements. We embarked on a journey through millennia, observing how the first humans set foot on this land, and how their descendants, step by step, built complex and distinctive civilizations. From the first hunter-gatherers, whose traces we find in ancient sites, to the majestic empires that left behind stone cities and sophisticated systems of governance, every stage of this long history is imbued with wisdom and ingenuity. We saw how the transition to agriculture, beginning with simple but vital crops like corn, beans, and squash, forever changed people's way of life. This allowed them to settle down, build permanent settlements, and later magnificent cities. In Mesoamerica, we met the Olmecs, often called the mother of civilizations, who laid the foundations for subsequent cultures. Their influence was felt in everything from art to their understanding of time. Then the Mayan city-states flourished, leaving us with a mysterious writing system, astonishing astronomical knowledge, and architectural masterpieces. Their legacy continues to inspire today. We also traveled to the heart of Mexico to witness the might of the Aztec Empire, their lakeside capital of Tenochtitlan, their complex social organization, and profound religious beliefs. And, of course, we traveled south to the Andes, where early cultures like the Nazca and Chavin left their unique marks in art and architecture. The pinnacle of this development was the Inca Empire, the children of the sun, who created the vast empire of Tawantinsuyu with its famous roads, terraced agriculture, and capital in Cusco. But America is more than just great empires. We also explored the vast diversity of North American cultures. From archaic peoples who adapted to diverse landscapes, to the Mississippian mound builders who created centers like Cahokia, and desert Pueblo farmers like the Anasazi, Hohokam, and Mogollon, whose cities and settlements still captivate the imagination.
We saw how the peoples of the Great Plains learned to live in harmony with bison, and how the inhabitants of the Pacific coast harnessed the riches of the ocean to create complex societies. Each of these cultures, regardless of their size or geographic location, made a unique contribution to the mosaic of pre-Columbian America. They developed their own belief systems, their own art forms, their own ways of interacting with the natural world.
They demonstrated remarkable adaptability, ingenuity, and a profound understanding of the environment. Their achievements in agriculture, architecture, astronomy, mathematics, and social organization were significant and distinctive. It's important to remember that these peoples lived their own lives, developed according to their own laws, creating rich and diverse cultures long before their world collided with that of Europeans. Their history is a story of human genius, resilience, and the pursuit of knowledge. They left us not only material evidence of their existence, but also a spiritual legacy that lives on in their descendants and in the land itself. This heritage is more than just a collection of archaeological finds or historical facts. It is a testament to what humanity is capable of when it lives in harmony with nature, when it values knowledge and traditions, when it strives to create sustainable and harmonious societies. It is the story of how people have found ways to live, thrive, and leave their mark on this land over millennia. It was precisely this rich and multifaceted world that Europeans would encounter, a world full of ancient traditions, complex social structures, and a profound understanding of nature, a world that had already reached significant heights in its development. Studying this period allows us to see America not simply as a new continent, but as a land with a millennia-long history, inhabited by peoples whose achievements deserve our deepest respect and attention.
Let this journey through time leave you with a sense of peace and understanding. Let it remind you of the infinite diversity of human experience and how much we can learn from listening to the stories of the past. The story of pre-Columbian America is a story of resilience, ingenuity, and a profound connection to the world. It is a story that is ending, but its legacy lives on, reminding us of the greatness of the human spirit.